Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui. Uranus is in Gemini, and I've already started to talk about all of the complexities of this transit because Uranus spends about 7 years in any sign. And so over the course of that 7 years, a lot of the astrology changes, life changes. And when you're talking about Uranus, a lot of that change is especially difficult to predict, but not impossible. There are some things that I can say about this transit for sure. Instead of diving into some of the more disturbing aspects of this transit, I wanted to come to you today and really speak from the heart about what is one of the most significant aspects of Uranus moving through Gemini for the next 7 years. Something that is changing the very nature of human connection, which, if you're asking me, really needs an upgrade. And that's what today's episode is all about. Today on the podcast, Uranus in Gemini, Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor?
Like many kids, I grew up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And the idea that a place with so much warmth and diversity and connection could exist was really exciting to my child brain. And at that time, I really didn't know that life and the experience of being somebody's neighbor as an older person would be very different than a lot of the things I was seeing on PBS. In my 35 years of life so far, I've had good neighbors, I've had fine neighbors that didn't really know, but they were there. And I've also had some really shitty neighbors. And you know, maybe you're like, Kaycee, what are you talking about? Maybe somebody left their trash outside a little too long, didn't break down the boxes in the shared trash area. Look, those things can be annoying, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people just hating me for who I am, not liking that I look around my neighborhood and I consider the people that are living on the street down the block from me to be my neighbors. That was really controversial in my neighborhood council meetings, and I had to fight for people to view other human beings that share space with my housed neighbors as people that are people, worthy of dignity, worthy of connection. Even as a child, I had some pretty intense experiences with people who I knew because I lived near them. One of my friends growing up, we used to play handball up against my garage. And, you know, it was the 90s. It was a great time. Slamming that thing up against that metal, it just felt good. And, you know, we were kids. Kids play and they run around. And while we were doing this, my friend stumbled and fell and ended up breaking her arm. Accidents happen. That's just a part of life. But my friend's dad didn't really see it the same way. See, my grandma was watching us play. That's what she did. She kept an eye on us. She was a Leo with a Virgo Mercury. She knew what to do, and she was gonna mind those kids and make sure we didn't get into trouble. Now, I don't know what she could have done differently other than not letting us play. A pretty innocent, fairly safe game. But this man was so angry. And he got his 2 little kids, who I used to be friends with, to help him start harassing my grandmother and my family. They would write threatening messages in chalk on our sidewalk. The guy called the cops. He banged on our door. He tried to intimidate us, me and my household, which at that time was just my mom and my grandma and me. I was 8 years old, and it was scary. This guy whose house I had been to, whose daughter I was friends with, had turned on us in such a freaky way that it really gave me pause about connecting with people in that same way. Fast forward to later in my life, and of course, that was a weird experience. I never assumed that every neighbor would be like that guy, but I continued to have some good experiences, some not so good experiences, and a few that were hard to deal with, if not downright scary. And that has shaped my attitude towards neighborliness. Is it worth it to go out of my way to connect with people just because we share space? Fast forward to now, May of 2026. I live in Los Angeles, which is my hometown, and it is currently blanketed in a sheet of smoke from yet another wildfire raging out of control. You may remember that pretty much right after the new year in 2025, Los Angeles suffered multiple devastating fires. Yeah, fire season is a part of living in California, but this is my home, and I have never seen a fire quite like what we experienced in 2025. Not only was the environmental loss devastating, but people died in those fires, and many more people than that lost everything. Not only the things that they owned, but their communities burned to the ground. And Los Angeles still hasn't recovered. But I do know that during that very scary time that is a little too easy to remember right now as we face the potential of another massive fire, that it was the act of being neighbors that made so many people in Los Angeles step up and help the people who were in the line of fire, even though the rest of us were having a rough time too. If you haven't lived through a big fire like this, not only does it devastate the areas that are burned directly, but there is ash and pollutants spread all around neighboring areas. We were surviving in brown, scary, polluted air for weeks and not knowing when it was going to come to an end. After the fires were thankfully put out, a lot of people that were directly impacted still have to deal with all of the things that burned in the air, now having settled into our soil, into our homes sometimes. And all of that has taken a tremendous amount of work. But through this process, one of the things that I've been reminded of is that it's our neighbors that get us through these crises. Aside from all the environmental intensity, we've also been under attack by ICE and the federal government. And people have been forced to rely on Neighborhood Watch to protect them from this invasive threat. I know I'm not the only one who's had bad experiences with neighbors, and especially in our hyper-individualistic culture. A lot of us don't give enough attention to these relationships. Sure, some of us have neighbors that we're friendly with, or maybe some of us are even lucky to befriend those neighbors and make deeper connections. For people in more marginalized communities, those neighbor relationships may be more familiar, more important, more practiced, because when you are a part of a marginalized community, depending on your neighbors for some type of mutual support is something that becomes a way of life, a way of surviving difficult circumstances. We don't all have the same story or experience, but I'd be willing to say that many of us listening to this don't think about our relationships with our neighbors too often. And if we do, maybe they're just not as important as other relationships in our life. But I'm here to ask you to rethink that. Because as I've said many times this year, we are through the looking glass. And one of the ways that we are through that looking glass is we currently have Uranus in Gemini. And if you don't already know, Gemini is a sign associated with our neighbors, our neighborhoods. It's also about communication, because those are the people that we typically first learn how to communicate with and learn from. The people who live around us, who teach at our schools, who deliver our mail, who are represented by the same politicians, and have a lot of shared interests, because when you live close together, that's how that works. Uranus has only recently moved into Gemini, and we're still very much getting used to the energy. But we're doing it while Uranus in Gemini is trine Pluto in Aquarius, which, if you've been around, you know, is about massive systemic change that will impact every human being on this planet. The two of these important social planets having this very intense interaction at a moment where so much in our world is changing is very telling. We are at a point where we are reshaping human connection, how we relate to each other on a fundamental level. With Uranus in Gemini, there will be upsets. There will be things in our neighborhoods that are not going the way we wish they were going. And in fact, I would bet that even before Uranus was in Gemini, that was true for many of us. So many of our neighborhoods, especially in the heart of empire, have been underdeveloped, have been exploited and degraded because they need more support than they're getting. We need more support than we're getting, because let's not forget, a neighborhood is a place where people live. One of the not so exciting things that Uranus in Gemini tells me is that there will continue to be disruptions to our day-to-day lives and where we live. And I've already kind of dropped some hints in this episode about what some of those things are going to be. Because again, the climate is in crisis. Our weather is getting more intense. And for you, it may not be a massive destructive fire. It could be an earthquake. It could be a hurricane. It could be an invading militarized force. And as much as we don't want to think about any of those things, when they do happen to us, and they will, not to all of us in the same way, but things will happen because these are the times that we're living in. Our first line of defense is going to be our neighbors, because we have that connection. We have that shared interest. And when shit hits the fan in our neighborhood, we are going to go through those experiences together, whether we'd prefer it to be that way or not. Some of us will learn this the hard way. We'll learn in the moment where things go wrong how important these connections are. And that is a valid way of going through life if that is how you want to do it. But I want to say that if that's the choice you make, you're missing out on some really amazing opportunities. As I've explained, I am not the one who knows every single person in my neighborhood. I am not the one out there waving and smiling and knowing everybody's names. I'm just not. I'm a Scorpio. I'm kind of quiet. I'm a little shy. And like I said, I've had some bad experiences. But we have a choice. And as I've gotten older, I have decided to not let those early life experiences be the whole story. When I became very politically disaffected in my early adulthood, I looked around and said, how am I going to make a difference in a world that I can clearly see is headed in a rough direction? What can I do? And the decision I came to well before I knew anything about astrology was pretty inspired. I decided that the best investment I could make was in the place that I live, Los Angeles, the place I love, that I call my home. I started paying attention to local politics. I found new ways to get involved in my community with other people who saw some of the things that I saw and wanted to work on those things together. I started going out of my way to make connections with the most marginalized people in my city, which are unhoused people that live on the streets and are abused by many of our other neighbors. Not every experience in this process has been ideal. There have been some rough days, and I have absolutely no regrets about any of it because I now know people all across Los Angeles, which is, by the way, fucking huge. Are all of the people I know my best friends? No, they're not. But they know me in a community sense. They know that I am a good neighbor. They know I care about Los Angeles. They know that if they ask me for help, I will do whatever I can to the best of my ability. I didn't necessarily grow up this way. This is not my normal. I had to kind of go out and make it happen and be pleasantly surprised when I, a very shy, quiet, indoor type, can look around my city and say, I know that people here have my back and I have theirs. I know that I've made my neighborhood a better place to live in. I know I've made my city a better place to live in. And I know when the next disaster hits the fan that I'm going to be in a much better position for all of the connections that I've made. We don't always have to look at our phones when a stranger is passing us on the street. We don't have to ignore somebody who's asking us for our spare change. We don't have to pretend that the very real human beings around us are NPCs that aren't worthy of our time or attention. And in fact, sometimes with neighbors, it's the small moments, the little gestures that really matter the most. I've lived in the apartment I live in now for almost a decade, and I've had a lot of neighbors come and go because that's how it is when you live in an apartment building. People move on. Like I said, some of the experiences here have been good, some of them have been bad, but most of them have been fairly neutral. And granted, I do live in a city. People tend to keep to themselves, especially here, especially this city. But recently, not too long after Uranus moved into Gemini, I got new next-door neighbors. And at first I was like, okay, another couple is moving into this apartment, and not all of the couples who've lived there before were big fans of the tattooed lesbian down the hall. I don't know why, I'm cool as shit, but, they get to have their own opinion, and that's fine. But these new neighbors came in, and I was like, okay, we're gonna have another couple down the hall. We're gonna get along, probably not gonna interact too much. But the universe said no. Things are different now, and Uranus is in Gemini. So the universe didn't let me off easy on this one. These neighbors, unlike all of the previous couples, took the time to introduce themselves. They told me that they moved here from another city. that they have kids who are pretty close to my age. They like music. From what I can tell about how they've decorated their porch, I think they're kind of spiritual as well. And they've been really lovely to chat with. They even said they would love to have breakfast on the porch with me sometime. In an earlier part of my life, I might not have known quite how to handle this relationship because I have a tendency to get nervous because of my history. But these people have been so warm and kind and neighborly. They respect my space while also inviting me to get to know them a little bit. And in a city that's stereotyped for being self-obsessed, I have to admit it has been incredibly refreshing. The possibility that just because somebody lives near me and we have a few things in common, that's enough to build an important connection on. In a time where pretty much any of us could go online and post something and just get absolutely dunked on, or even canceled by a bunch of strangers, I find this kind of respectful but connected relationship that is what being a neighbor is to be incredibly refreshing. And I think this is really at the heart of the next decades that we're going to live through together. I've said many times that the very nature of human connection is going through a massive evolution. And I truly believe that Uranus in Gemini and, of course, Pluto in Aquarius are a big part of making that happen. Not all of the people we're going to connect with will be under the best circumstances because the times that we live in are challenging. But it is those relationships that are going to make us stronger, make us better, make us more connected. We are going to have to evolve the way that we relate to each other. And that means that we can no longer disregard people just because they're not our friend, just because they're not somebody that we already know intimately. Simply sharing space, whether it's a sidewalk or a neighborhood or a city or a state, is enough. And what's even more exciting to me in this era is that Uranus in Gemini is going to expand our definition of neighbors. If you hadn't noticed, the world has gotten a lot smaller. Thanks in no small part to media and the internet, we are now more connected than ever. And this is shaping our politics because even people like me here in the heart of empire can look at the devastation that we're leveling on places like Palestine and feel connected to the people that live there because those are our neighbors too. We may not share a block with them. We may not even share a continent with them. But we can watch how those people live their daily lives. We can watch their accounts of what's happening to them. We can even speak to these people, and many of us have because these people have had to broaden their definition of what it means to be a neighbor, to ask for help and support, to survive horrific circumstances. We can see that the world is getting smaller because the Palestinian genocide has been going on for decades and generations. But it's only now, with the technology that we have, with the education that we have, with more awareness, that we actually care to see people halfway across the world as our neighbors. This is incredibly powerful stuff. And let me just tell you right now, this is exactly what the fascists are afraid of. They want us to continue looking at people who practice a different faith or live in a different region as enemies so that we can be pushed around and controlled more easily. But as you can see by how things are developing on our planet, it's not working anymore. Many people have outgrown the idea that only people who are just like us are worth caring about because they've seen how demented and inhumane that is. And the only way forward is to continue building on what it means to be a neighbor. No longer only caring about me and mine, but instead us and ours. No one should have to pass our personal litmus test to be able to coexist with us, to share space with us. And when we change our frame of mind about what's possible, everyone that we interact with throughout our day-to-day life is a neighbor, is a potential connection to be made. Not all connections last a lifetime, and not all of them are intimate, but every single one has an opportunity to change the way that we relate to each other. And that is how we're going to change the world together.
Won't you please, please won't you be my neighbor?
If you missed my recent episodes on the Taurus new moon, you should know that the next 6 months are going to be pretty intense. The fascists that run the world, that exploit it and make a bunch of money off of it, are tightening their grip because they're realizing that their objectives are not really that popular. Who would have thought? It is great news that they are not popular, but they are going to continue to make a big mess to try to maintain the power that they do have. So these next 6 months are not ones to sit on the sidelines. This is a time to be very actively engaged. And your neighborhood is the best place to start. You don't have to do it alone. In fact, a lot of my work is about supporting people through this process. You may have heard me mention Petty Astrology Live before, and that is the live version of this podcast. I tend to talk a lot more about current events and what's going on in detail there because I like the audience interaction, I like answering questions, and I don't talk about this stuff for my health. I talk about it because we are all living through it. We're navigating very interesting times together. So if you haven't already checked that out, that is what that's for. And it happens on YouTube and Twitch every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific. I'd love for you to join us. And if you ever can't make that time, I want you to know that sponsors of this podcast always get the replay. If sponsoring this podcast for $5 a month is too much for you, that is okay. I know that times are really tight in a lot of our budgets right now, but please remember that you can join my Patreon community for free. And I put out a weekly astrology of the week. It's like a horoscope for my community. And there's also a community chat. Plus, I talk about current events and predictions all of the time in our current events chat. All I'm saying with this is that I practice what I preach. I strive to be a good neighbor. And the entire goal of Petty Astrology is to help us move through this moment together, to help us move through Pluto and Aquarius and shape this new world that we're all creating together. If that sounds interesting to you, we would love to have you join us. You can find all the links in the show notes. That's it for this week's episode. Tune in on Patreon for even more Petty Astrology. This episode was written, edited, and produced by me, Kaycee Felton-Lui. It was also produced by Tony Penne and Dork. The podcast art is by Max Swanson. The music is by Paul Schneider. The Debussy score was licensed from a pianist whose name I cannot find, but it is incredible and beautiful. Thank you. This episode was brought to you by my sponsors over on Patreon.